On this week's video, I see a bad moon arising because we are talking about the Howling series. That's right, I've been putting this off for a really long time now, but it's about time that we get down to it and figure out the continuity of this VHS franchise staple. You always see this when you go into the video store. It felt like there was always a new entry on the shelves, and we're going to find out if it actually does have any continuity or if it's a pure anthology series. The saga begins back in 1981 with The Howling. Based on a Gary Brandner book of the same name and directed by Joe Dante, this film has the distinction of coming out the same year as American Werewolf in London, making 1981 basically the benchmark for lycanthropes. We have John Steed and R.J. Fletcher, and Elliot's mom, and Roger Corman in a cameo. Karen has a traumatic experience with a killer and has awards from 1979 on her mantle, and her husband is a sort of a discount Tom Atkins, while her therapist sends her to a retreat called The Colony. John Carradine is here, as is the mysterious Marcia, and everyone is just a little bit off, like TC here. Meanwhile, Walter Paisley and Forey Ackerman shows up, and Bill gets attacked in the woods, and you know what that means. He and Marcia kickstart the furry subculture and become cartoons for a minute, and when it turns out that the guy who attacked Karen lived near the colony, and he makes an appearance, giving us our first good look at a werewolf here. Eddie's still alive, it turns out, and played by a pretty unrecognizable Robert Picardo. He changes in a pretty terrific transformation scene that pretty strongly competes with its Oscar-winning rival that year. Turns out that the whole colony is woofy, including the doc, and Karen's friend Chris shows up to take down Eddie, and then TC, and then sets everyone on fire. As they flee, we see Chris's car with an 81 registration sticker on it, so we're probably set in real time here, and Karen is bitten by a wolf that turns out to be Bill, and in order to reveal the existence of werewolves, Karen transforms on live TV. But if all lycanthropes were this cute and fuzzy looking, why would anyone mind? Aw. Turns out that Marcia survived though, so the colony lives on. It took 4 years for a sequel to appear with 1985's Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, and yeah, that's the actual title. It starts off with Lord Summerisle, and we're at Karen's funeral, so we're set right after the last one. Karen's brother, otherwise known as the discount Steve Rogers, or Your Hunter from the Future, and they lay her to rest underneath another marker in which someone's death date is listed as 1984. So we're at least there? So that changes our years, and since that marker is presumably new, we're possibly set in 84 for both films then. I guess Karen's not dead and... Hey, can you keep it down, please? I'm trying. Hey, I'm trying to do a video. But hey, Chris Lee in New Wave glasses. Werewolves are on the prowl, and we're told the tape of Karen transforming disappeared, but Stefan has it, but it looks, well, different. There's apparently immune werewolves that can only be killed by titanium, and they put Karen to rest. Stefan, Ben, and Jenny head to Transylvania to find Sturba, the werewolf queen, and Mickey's here before going to prison for cutting off mattress tags. And Sturba is Sybil Danning, and yeah, there's the scene that everyone knows from this movie. The acting is impeccable.
Boo! Hi, honey.
And it turns out that Sturba is Stefan's brother, and side note, they apparently accidentally received monkey suits instead of wolf suits for the movie, and just went with it. So except for close-ups showing a woofy snout, they're obviously hilarious monkey costumes. And if you thought the effects of the first film were impressive, check these out. When Jenny is kidnapped, they launch a full assault on the werewolf castle to save her, with Stefan eventually killing Sturba but dying in the process. And you know, over time, I think this film has lost its reputation for being one of the worst films ever made, but let's bring that back, shall we? It ends with the Wolf Band playing the one song they've played in the entire film, with footage of Sybil Danning taking off her top 17 times. 17 times. Which she didn't know about and apparently caused her to leave the first screening in tears, so way to go, Philip Mora. It became an official franchise, and Mora returned to the saga 2 years later with 1987's Howling 3: The Marsupials. Yep, marsupial werewolves. Werewolves that are marsupials. We get footage from 1905 of a werewolf killed by Aborigines, and then we go to present day and Professor Beckmeyer investigating lycanthrope attacks in Russia. So he heads to Australia, of course. Meanwhile, a young werewolf girl runs away from her family, and she's chased down by a casting agent to put her in a horror movie because, you know, that's how that works. And the director puts her in a movie without even audition. He literally meets her as she shows up to the shoot, because that's how that works. Donnie and Jerboa hook up, and he finds out that she has a furry belly and a pouch, and seems cool with it, and then...
What you need is a smoking gun.
What I need is a werewolf holding a smoking gun.
So did they just pick up this conversation later? Did Harry not think of this comeback until they were just strolling outside? How did Sharp not ask him what the hell he was talking about? They pick up a paper and it actually says it's 1984, so we're set at the same time as the first two films then, and add in some weird dream stuff, and Jerboa is pregnant and retrieved by her family. Meanwhile, a Russian ballerina woofs out on stage in a pretty memorable bit, although I'm not sure why the core dancers are in warm-ups, but the lead is in full stage dress. And Jerboa has her baby in record time, and it goes into her pouch, of course. The military close in on the tribe and run tests on them, and they explain that it takes more than a bite to change you, contradicting the first film. So it's possible that we're set in an alternate universe, especially since they go through a history of werewolves, and there's no mention of Karen's televised appearance. Also, though, Olga says that there might be a tribe in California, so it could just be possible that there are different breeds of wolves, so the rules could be different. It gets a little weird as they call upon a werewolf spirit, and in an odd reversal from the first two movies, we're supposed to root for the werewolves here. It's odd because it's even a reversal from earlier in the movie when wolves were just killing regular people. Thylo becomes a super mega giant wolf, and it takes a bazooka to kill him, and...
I think he fell in love with the Russian werewolf.
Was it female?
Yes.
Well, thank Christ for that.
Ah, the 80s, where homophobia even tops a fear of werewolves. Henry and Olga get together and have a kid. Jerboa and Donnie go back to LA, and Donnie makes sure to wear his short shorts and mesh top. And then years pass, and kids grow up, and they say 15 years has passed, so we're actually in the late 90s now. And we're back in Hollywood, and D&B are back in the biz, and then we bounce ahead to what Harry says is 8 years later, so it's now mid-2000s, and little baby Zach is all grown up, I guess like 23 or 24 years old now, and while getting an award, the flashing lights caused Jerboa to change because, you know, she's been in the film industry for years, and no cameras have ever flashed around her, I guess. There was a mere 1 year gap until 1988's Howling 4, the original Nightmare, which is pretty curious as it's actually somewhat of a remake of sorts, in that it's another take of interpreting Gary Brandner's novels, attempting to be more faithful to the source material. Directed by John Hoff, who gave us the classic Legend of Hell House, Instead of a news anchor, we have author Marie here, who has visions, so her doctor recommends she goes to a place in the country to relax. There's of course a mysterious howling in the woods and a seductive woman named Eleanor, and there's no way to not notice that the entire film is done ADR.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hi.
Howdy.
You must be the new couple renting Wilderness Cottage, right?
Which means all the sound was added afterwards, but apparently it wasn't because of production issues, it was because the budget was so low and too low to account for sound recording. There's werewolf shenanigans and some spiritual visions and such, and Richard gets bitten, and we see a lease from the previous tenants marked as 1986, and it's said that they disappeared a year ago, so this one is set in 1987. Richard transforms, and this movie's version of a big transformation scene involves him melting down into a puddle, and then that puddle forms a werewolf, and I mean, that just seems really impractical. It looks kind of cool, though. It's soon, of course, revealed that the whole town is lycanthropes, even though I honestly think that they just used German shepherds instead of wolves, and they burn them all up. Important to note that there's no connection to the original films, and you could easily place this in a different continuity, especially since it's sort of a retelling of the first film, but it's also different enough that it can be set in the same universe, as there's really nothing to contradict what we've already seen. Again, only 1 year went by, and in 1989, we got Howling 5, The Rebirth, and starts off in Budapest back in 1489. We see a baby survive a massacre at a castle and then bounce ahead 500 years to 1989, and a group of people are attending the castle's reopening. Of course, there's a werewolf crawling around the castle causing trouble. I mean, eventually causing trouble, because everything takes forever to happen in this movie, and there's some classic dialogue.
You are so beautiful. You must have had hundreds of admirers when you were young.
This woman is at most 6 or 7 years older than the other one. I mean, what is she, 30?
Did they just, intend to cast an older woman and then just, forgot?
Eventually, they're all trapped and snowed in and being picked off by the wolf, who you don't really get to see for budgetary reasons, obviously, and they all realize that none of them knew their parents, and they all have the same mark on their arms. It turns out that they're all descendants of those that were killed at the castle 500 years earlier, and one of them is the werewolf. But who can it be? Soon it's just David and Mary Lou of the amazing acting.
The cat will not rest until we are both dead. I must kill him!
No, this can't be happening!
And she kills the Count, the most likely suspect. But then she was the werewolf the whole time? And then it just ends? Yeah, okay, there's no link to the other films, but again, if you want it to be in the original continuity, that's fine. There's nothing contradicting, really. This movie is especially frustrating, though, since we never really get a good look at the werewolf. Mainly, I guess, just budget. The series took a 2-year break, but came back in 1991 with Howling 6, The Freaks, which kicks off in a small town with the arrival of a mysterious drifter. He helps Dewey and Lizzie to fix up a church, and a freak show rolls in. The show is home to the non-Julian Sands Warlock, Huggy Bear, the Oompa Loompa, the first recognizable faces in the series since Part 2. When Ian and Harker encounter each other, there seems to be some ulterior motives happening, and we meet the assortment of freaks. And Ian and Liz get a little closer. Ian has this calendar here, and it's July, and the days of the week match with 1990, which is when this is filmed, so that's probably our date here. And it turns out that he's a werewolf, and we get a pretty decent transformation scene courtesy of Steve Johnson. And hey, it's nice to see this franchise even trying again. His final form is a little more old-school Wolfman than 80s-era wolf creature, and he's captured by the freak show. He gets put on display and forced to perform, but then it turns out that Harker isn't human either. He's a vampire. He's killed Ian's family and somehow gave him the werewolf curse, and we get a final face-off between the two with a throwback to the Marsupials with having a good guy werewolf character. He stakes Harker and they hit him with sunlight, killing the vamp. This one isn't a great film by any means, but it was a huge step up for the series and is pretty enjoyable. Again, as with the other ones, if you don't want to see this one as connected to the others, it's fine to watch it by itself, or it could simply just be in the same continuity. There was a 4-year gap, and it wasn't until 1995 that a new sequel came out, and it didn't have a number and was simply called Howling: New Moon Rising. This one was directed by Clive Turner, who directed Part 4 and wrote 4 and 5, so I don't have high hopes. There's an inspector investigating a murder that happened after a circus, and there's a new biker guy in town played by Turner himself, who also produced, wrote, and edited this one. Apparently, Turner loved the small town the film is set in real life and cast the locals in the film, and the performances are exactly what you'd expect from a bunch of random people in a movie.
Well, hi, Ted. Bob said you was looking for work.
Hey, Jack. Looks like you've been getting your shirts out of Jacqueline's side of the closet again.
They actually reference the events of the beginning of the 5th film, calling it 500 years ago. Turner's character is, of course, smooth and awesome at everything, and everyone just loves him, because, that's the kind of character that you cast yourself to be. And so much of the town scenes, and there are plenty of them, just seem like Clive filming the locals doing their thing and then trying to find a place for the scenes in the movie. Finally, a werewolf shows up and starts killing people, and then...
Jim, you seen Ted?
I think he's over there.
Just like in that general direction. Nowhere in specific, just over there.
And then Ted shows up from the other way.
She's over there.
This guy is like super discount Waze.
There's a bit of alteration of Part 5 as they take the character of Ray and call him Ted, linking us to this film and say his body was never found, but we see his body in that film. The priest says it's 3 years since the castle burned down, which was supposed to be the ending of the 5th movie, so that would make this 1990 actually then, and this is just one of the hardest things that I've ever had to watch. It's not really a movie, it's more of a series of scenes with rock bottom acting and occasional music numbers, but consider those numbers to be fractions. And then Marie Evans comes back from the 4th movie, actually played by the same actress even. She's killed pretty quickly though, and wait, they say the werewolf was using her, like there was one main werewolf, and it was the one from the castle. So I guess they're saying the Part 4 took place after Part 5, although that doesn't make sense. But they also say that the werewolf can change bodies, and there were other wolves in Drago, so I really don't think it's the same wolf. It turns out that Cheryl here is Mary Lou from the 5th movie in a different form, and she transforms in the worst changing scene in possibly ever, and the town shoots her. And then it's just over, thank goodness. But no, in the end credits, Clive Turner actually even sings, and it's just as diluted as the rest of this movie.
Oh gee, how could you make such a big mistake with a handsome dog like me?
One of the worst things that I have ever seen. The Howling series went away for a really long time and didn't reappear again until 2011 with The Howling Reborn, although you could just call it The Howling Twilight for that matter. In the intro, a young pregnant woman is killed by a werewolf and her baby is born, and we flash to 18 years later and her son Will is here, and he's a high school student, and there's some sketchy new kids. When Will searches his mom, there's a bunch of cite dates, and one of them is 2011, so we're at least in real time here. And he sparks a romance with Eliana, and his eyesight fixes itself, and this is weird. He discovers that he can see without his glasses, and that everything is blurry when he wears them. But yet in the next scene, he's wearing them again. Like, why would he keep them on if everything is blurry? Then, a bully in the school, who has a gun with him, gets killed by a werewolf, and he pleads with it.
Hey, I'm not an asshole, man. Just misunderstood.
In the next shot, no one is alarmed. A kid fires several shots in a school, and no one heard it? I mean, I know this was 2011 when school shootings were like every week instead of every other day, so I don't think that people were that jaded yet. Will heals up, and it turns out that his mom is still alive, and she's a werewolf, and she tells him that he's been wolfy since birth. The school goes into lockdown, trapping our heroes inside, so they make flamethrowers. The wolf guys hang around shirtless like they stepped out of a Decatto movie, and then finally we get to see one of the fully changed ones, and it's not bad. Kay's plan is to create a werewolf army that will rise on a blue moon, and meanwhile graduation is going on, and Will tries to use elevator wires, just random loose wires in an elevator as a defibrillator, and it works. Will finally changes and fights his mom in some fun wolf suit action, more than we've seen since about 4 movies ago, and Mommy's killed by another wolf that turns out to be Eliana. I'll give it extra credit for ending with a weird take on the Book of Love.
The Book of Love is long and boring. No one can lift the damn thing.
While they destroy all the other werewolves by blowing up the school, and Will's video of him transforming goes viral, and a full-scale war with wolves kicks off.
So there you have it, 8 movies. About to be another one. I think they're planning some sort of either remake or reboot of this in the near future, but it doesn't really matter. You could really make any werewolf movie and call it The Howling, because there's nothing in common in these films really, except for the fact of just general werewolves. Quite a few of them were pretty enjoyable. I had fun through quite a few of these. First one is a classic of horror. Loved it. The second one is just so much fun because it's so ridiculously bad. I got a kick out of the third one. Freaks is actually pretty damn good, and comparatively, I bet you if I had watched the most recent one, I don't think I would have liked it that much, The Howling Reborn, but watching it in succession with all the previous ones, it actually was pretty good. I enjoyed it more than I think I would have if I had watched it just by itself. Let me know what you thought of these down below in the comments. I want to hear your take on the Howling series. Give me any comments that you've got. Like and subscribe to the video as well too. Please subscribe to the channel, helps keeps going. As do these guys over here, these are my patrons on patreon.com. You can go there and help keep this channel going and making great videos like this one. And I will see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks guys, appreciate it. Bye-bye.